Hello and welcome to Press Corner, our regular Sunday morning review of key events with our colleagues in the media here in the heart of Europe. On Press Corner, we celebrate the luxury of a free press by listening to diverse opinions and letting our audience reach their own conclusions. My name is Ashim Kumar and you're watching TVP World. Joining us today are my guests, Agnieszka Wolk-Waniewska from Nie magazine, Jakub Mielnik, a columnist with Frost.
Hello.
And Jakub Bierna, journalist on Belsat TV.
Hello.
Thank you all very much for joining us and taking this time on a Sunday morning. I know how challenging it can be getting out of bed on Sunday. So welcome and looking forward to hearing what you have to say. We're going to start off talking about the attempted assassination attempt on Prime Minister of Slovakia, Robert Fico. Slovakia faces a new grim chapter after the attempted assassination of its Prime Minister, Robert Fico. Violence Act, which took place earlier this week, has underlined the deep-seated divisions that have long plagued the country. Now, before we get into that, we've got a short clip to share with you and our audience, and then I'll be taking your views.
Since Wednesday, the Slovakian Prime Minister, Robert Fico, has been recovering from life-threatening wounds. His would-be assassin, identified as a 71-year-old government critic, has already been charged. What followed was a massive debate on why this happened.
A physical attack on the Prime Minister is primarily an attack on a person, but it is also an attack on democracy. Any violence is unacceptable. The hateful rhetoric we witness in society leads to hateful acts.
Initial investigations show that his actions were motivated by his disagreement with the government and its reforms. Recent months have seen massive protests, largely peaceful, against the Slovakian head of government. Fico is seen as making polarizing decisions regarding foreign policy and domestic issues.
I don't like the direction our Prime Minister is taking after the elections. I am disappointed. We are part of the West.
Fico has grown increasingly critical of Western support for Ukraine, despite Slovakia's membership of both the EU and NATO. Even before his election in 2023, he promised to bring an end to Slovakia's military aid to Ukraine.
I will limit myself to one sentence. Slovakia and the people in Slovakia have bigger problems than Ukraine. That's all I can say about this now.
After his election victory, thousands of Slovakians rallied against what they called Fico's pro-Russian and other policies. Slovakians still believe that Fico's October election stirred the pot, bringing up toxic political debates. Still, no one thought it would come to this.
OK, so unsurprisingly, all sorts of people are making all kinds of arguments about why this happened, the background, the context, and so on. But let's start with some basics. One of the biggest challenges or accusations against Fico is that basically he was anti-EU, pro-Russia. I'd like to take your view on that. I'll start with you, if I may, Agnieszka.
I would say it's Polish way of seeing things. And I was listening to this coverage of this assassination attempt, and it was deeply disturbing for me because it was very, very patronizing. It was like Slovakian people are this immature, childish nation that doesn't understand what's happening in the world now. That's not true. There's simply a small nation of the outskirts of the European Union, and they thinking what Robert Fico is thinking, that we have a bigger problem than Ukrainian-Russian war. It's not like they're pro-Russia. They just don't want to be part of this big international problem because they have really some big problems on their own.
Yes, but they can't exclude themselves from the international arena. I mean, they are part of the European Union, NATO, and so on. So they can't simply say, well, I'm sorry, we've got our own problems, forget about the other countries. They can't do that, can they?
Absolutely, but they cannot. They don't have to be pushed to be part of this emotional crusade in which we are in Poland are participating. And they have quite different view than we have. I have this, there is some Slovakian think tank called Globsec, and I have 50% of Slovakians are thinking the USA pose a threat to their country, and 56% that Russia pose the threat to their country. So there are.
It's evenly divided.
Evenly divided, and they don't want. They're thinking, which is quite understand, that by helping Ukraine with weapons, they're provoking Russia and bringing themselves closer to war.
Right. I'm sorry, I have to pause you. I'd like to bring your colleagues in. Jakub, so is Poland being patronizing? Is Poland simply saying, well, you Slovakians should be behaving in a particular way when, 50% of people are pro-Russia and they selected Fico after all?
That's not only a Polish patronizing attitude, if we can call it that like that. A few days ago, I was interviewing Jan Macháček, one of the advisors of a Czech president, very significant figure of anti-communist opposition in Czechoslovakia, one of the musicians of a legendary band called Plastic People of the Universe, signatory of Charter 77, very significant person and also very familiar with the Czech and Slovak politics and also international politics. And he said that there is a very big problem with Slovakia, and those polls you are quoting are sign of this problem. Slovakia during communist time was very pleased with the system imposed them. There was almost no political opposition to communists at the time, and right now they are displaying this kind of sympathetic attitude toward Russian aggression to Ukraine. And the paradox is that Robert Fico, which was before involved in very murky dealings, and his government collapsed because people around the government were behind the killing of Jan Kiszka, journalist, investigative.
Yes, but that was never proved. The charges were dropped.
Sure, but the smell, bad smell is around him for years. Mm-hmm. Paradox is that Robert Fico, despite his pro-peace, so-called pro-peace, which in fact means pro-Russian rhetorics, has not stopped armaments shipments to Ukraine. Slovakian military industries earning good money, selling, not providing for free, but selling armaments to Ukraine. And despite so-called anti-EU policy of his government, he was not blocking EU funds for Ukraine, as well, contrary, for example, to Viktor Orban, who is also perceived as a Russian asset in European Union.
On that point, I'd like to bring you in, please, Jakub. Now, Viktor Orban, Slovakia, Fico, are they? How do you kind of see them in the context of the European Union? Are they an obstacle to the unified policy that the EU needs to show in a number of areas, and Ukraine, of course, is one of them?
This is the, for me, example that the European Union is a democratic union whatsoever. So, it's hard to, among 27 members, if 27 members were agreed on everything, it means that we are no more in democratic in democratic area, in democratic world, and we must consider it as well in forming policy, foreign policy. Of course, from Polish perspective, is very annoying that because we perceive Russia as an almost direct threat to Poland, Baltic states as well, and we have countries which is against. So I would say we must deal with it, and we couldn't push them too much into this direction, you know, to impose them.
Yeah. Yeah.
We should find the ways
to bring them into the fold, or to actually find some kind of unified response, even without everyone's support. Which do you mean?
I think if we can make them help, it's okay. But if not, we have to find another ways. And of course, we remember, like with Viktor Orban, there was a question of assistance to Ukraine, and he had to step out from the one of the summits, not to showing support, and in the end, he supported. So you know, this is the question. Of course,
it's unclear exactly how they're going to respond.
Of course, this is the question also of internal politics. Slovakian people, they are perceived as this pro-Slav-like movement they have the same attitude during the war and NATO intervention in Serbia, for example, in Yugoslavia. They were pro-Serbian. So we have to deal with these people because we are not one nation under God, let's say, in Europe, but 27 of
One nation under God, Agnieszka, or not. But one of the other reasons that has been put forward for this by Prime Minister Fico's party against the opposition is that hate speech is responsible for this assassination. Do you believe that a 71-year-old artist who has publicly declared no political affiliations is going to be motivated by hate speech?
I'd rather think he's going to be motivated by he's some kind of mental breakdown. And but of course, every party, both parties, will try to make some political capital on this situation, talking about, and this is the same thing here in Poland. We're hearing it's like with President Adamowicz, the president of Gdańsk, who was killed by a crazy person who just wanted to punish someone important for his perceived by him as unjust incarceration. So we are in a situation when the hate speech is used as a reason for things we cannot really avoid. If there are some people who have trouble with themselves, who have some different mental breakdowns, and it's like this.
Yes.
Would be, of course, sorry, I want to...
Yes.
Would be, of course, better if there were no hate speech. But there will be. So,
however you define hate speech and how influential that is, I mean, that's a whole different question, right? How important and powerful is hate speech on people's actions, and can we just blame everything on hate speech? Let's move on now to Georgia. Actually, before we do, there's a connection that I'd like to highlight. One of the policies that Robert Fico's government was thinking of producing was a Foreign Agents Act, very similar to the Russian one. Hasn't actually been implemented yet. But the Foreign Agents Act is really underneath the protests that have been going on in Georgia for weeks. And sadly, the bill has...
For months, I would say.
For months,
yes, even.
many weeks. Yeah.
That's the second attempt to
well, that's exactly one of my points. But now it has been vetoed by the president, but she doesn't really have the power to kill the bill, right? So it's going to become law. So let's start with this. Why, in your opinion, was the government so determined to get this bill through, despite public protest, which, as you say, last year stopped the bill? Why this time were they so determined to get it through?
Well, this is pretty simple. They see that public discontent is so widespread that they have no chance for re-election, probably next year, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, later this year.
So if they can implement this law, they can use it as a tool to crush the opposition, which is going to take over power, and keep this power. And this is also very important from the position of people who are behind the ruling party in Georgia.
Right.
Party was created by oligarch who is closely tied with the Kremlin, and people in the Georgian government, maybe not all of them, but majority of them, are clearly Russian assets exercising Russian interests in Caucasus region. And those interests are not very successful recently for Moscow. They've lost grip on Azerbaijan, which is cooperating closely with Turkey and also with Israel. They've lost a grip on Armenia because of war on Karabakh, lost for Armenia. Russia didn't provide the military umbrella they used to provide them with their long-term historical conflict with the Turkish people. There is also a prospect of a very big unrest on the northern Caucasus with the rumors of bad health shape of Kadyrov in Chechnya and succession war in northern Caucasus, which can easily spread.
Also there's tension in the relationship with Kazakhstan. But so there are all these things going on.
This is a little bit further east.
It is, but there are all of these
So
dynamics.
Georgia is crucial, and present Georgian government is a crucial for Russian interest in that region
to
because
maintain some kind of
influence. Some kind of influence, not some kind, to have government controlled from Moscow in Tbilisi.
Okay, we'll delve into that, but before that, we've got a short clip.
A massive wave of unrest has taken over Georgia's political scene after Parliament voted in favor of a Kremlin-inspired law. The bill, which they say was necessary to ensure the transparency of foreign funding of NGOs, has led to a nationwide standstill. Ahead of the vote, Georgian Dream was clearly warned about the dangers the new bill would bring.
This law is taking Georgia further than away from the European Union path. This is a U-turn to which the European Union will certainly react.
It wasn't just Georgians out on the streets. The foreign ministers of Lithuania, Estonia and Iceland joined the protests in the capital, Tbilisi, hand in hand. But all that was disregarded once the MPs backed the bill by 84 votes to 30, in defiance of the nationwide demonstrations. Now, groups in Georgia that receive over 20% of the funding from abroad will have to register as foreign agents.
The purpose and aim is only one. We don't want to go back to SSSR, Soviet Union. We don't want to go there. That's why everyone, no matter if students or older people, young people, everyone is here. Because we are fighting for one aim.
But this law is nothing new. It was inspired by similar legislation in place in Russia since 2012. Those who have fallen victim to it warn that it only makes it easier to crack down on dissent.
This entails the loss of many partners, including the loss of partnerships with governmental entities that are afraid to engage with groups labeled as foreign agents.
Georgian President Salome Zurabishvili sided with the foreign agents bill opponents and vetoed the legislation. She explained her decision in a televised address on Saturday. Today I vetoed the Russian law. The law is Russian in its essence and its spirit. It contradicts our constitution and all European standards. Therefore, it represents an obstacle to our European path. Zurabishvili's veto is, however, only symbolic, as the Georgian Dream has enough seats to override it by holding another vote.
So, Yakov's just laid out the argument, basically Russia wants its control over Georgia. But, Georgia became a formal candidate for EU membership December 2023, right? So before it became a candidate, these protests took place, the bill was removed. After it became a candidate, they ignored the protests. Is there a direct connection there?
It's hard to say for me, but probably yes, because now they have no arguments to be stopped, like in this case. But I guess the biggest problem in this that, as we saw in Russia, this foreign agent law is developing there. They started with a list of foreign agents with no penalty for it, in fact, and now they came to the point when a foreign agent couldn't be a candidate in the election. So as we see, if Georgia wants to be part of the West, in effect, it couldn't pass such a bill. Of course, we can discuss about the foreign influence on the political internal market, but in this case, I guess that's too much.
Agnieszka, is this the end of Georgia's EU membership?
I'm not sure. I think, well, it's good to remember that this act, the Foreign Agents Registration Act, first was in USA, and it's still in power. It's from 1938, and well, it's not the Russian idea, to be frank. So we cannot really tell the other countries.
Are they the same? I mean, 1938, yeah, absolutely, but it has evolved, and it was designed specifically during just before the Second World War, right? But it has evolved now. Is that the same as what the Russians call the?
No, but the idea of forcing people to admit to some kind of international relationships is not new, and I think it can be used in a very bad way, and probably it will be in Georgia now used in a very bad way. But I don't think the sole idea is the reason to exclude a country from trying to go to.
So what is the idea then?
Well, the idea is that when the country is on the crossroads between East and West, and there are some forces in play which are bigger than this country, which is evidently in Georgia's position, people want to know who's paid by whom. And as I understand, both sides are trying to get some influence. The history of pro-Western leader of Mikhail Saakashvili is really deeply troubling for Georgia. He wasn't really a democratic leader. He's a criminal, actually, and he's in jail. And
it's a little bit too much, I guess. I mean.
Okay. Sorry, I'll come to you.
He's responsible for several things. For one, very several beating of an opposition member of parliament.
Right.
And so he's not a very good example of pro-Western politics in Georgia. I think this is a very complicated situation for this country.
It certainly is. It certainly is complicated, and the previous Prime Minister has been accused of all of these things. I know you want to say something.
No. Yeah. I mean, of course, Saakashvili is not an angel, but his legacy in Georgia is something remarkable, and anyone who's been to this country before Saakashvili and after Saakashvili, there were two really different countries.
That's right.
And the progress was made, and I don't think there are two sides of the political fight. Like, for example, we can say about it in case of Slovakia, we have like 50 or 60% of Slovaks who are supporting Russian war in Ukraine, and that's the fact. The other fact in regard to Georgia is that 80 or 70 or 90% of Georgians want to join European Union and don't want this bill in the first place.
Right.
And comparing this American initial bill to the bill which is used by authoritarian regimes to put people in prison, to kick them out from the country, to take over their assets, is something different than the transparency of financing of openly acting international or national organization. This is something really different. So I think, Saakashvili was not an angel, and probably there are some reasons to put him to court, but not to jail him and to starve him almost to death.
Starving himself.
Right.
Really.
All right, still.
And another interesting question is, Western organization, they are open and transparent, so they are giving money to Georgian media or organization openly. It must be in the books, and Russia will always find a way to finance their outlets by bringing money in the suitcase, yes, and nobody will find out whether...
Well, I think it's very difficult to deny the fact that this act in Russia has been used to shut down independent media.
I'm not trying to deny it.
And exclude people from the democratic process as well.
Well, right. So here's my question about Georgia. Is it going to be used in the same way? I mean, the people clearly don't want this bill, right? And this is not just something that happens in the cities. Various experts have told us that this is across the country. Is there a time you envisage, Agnieszka, that the people's will actually be implemented by the Georgian Dream Party, or does that party need to be replaced?
I think that this party needs to be replaced. It's natural, and in the democratical process, I think it's kind of suicidal to go once more with this bill with such a strong opposition from society. So I think they will simply lose the election, and it will be this.
If
outcome.
they're allowed a free and fair election, that is.
Listen, we were told in Poland last year that there are no free elections, that we are under influence of the peace very strongly, and then there will be no free election. There was free election. I think when the people really want to vote and to change the government, they will.
Oh,
Right.
There is a,
Well, let's hope so.
I guess there is a difference between Poland being member of European
Of course.
Union and stable democracy, whatever we would say about peace and its ruling, and the comparison with Georgia, which is far away from power circles of Western world, from decision-making, thinking. They are just, backwaters
lone
of
voice in that region.
of former Soviet Empire. And
It's again very patronizing. You really think that Georgia are not able to live in...
Georgians are able to do anything they want. They just have a wrong government to let them to do it.
I don't think it's our place to do who's the wrong and who's the right government for the Georgian people.
OK, well, that's a matter of opinion, and we'll let our audience make their choices based on what you say. So thank you for that. I'd like us to move on, please, to the situation in Ukraine. Now, Ukrainians are actually facing quite a big military onslaught. That's continuing, with Moscow's main goal being the capture of the Donetsk region. At the same time, their efforts to capture other fortifications on the front line are ramping up. The most recent assault on Kharkiv is no exception. Let's have a look at a quick clip.
Just this month, Moscow was reported to have made its largest gains yet in the war in Ukraine. President Zelensky announced that reinforcements were being sent to the front line in Kharkiv, where the situation could only be described as difficult. Russia's latest offensive has further stretched Ukraine's outgunned and outmanned forces after taking over 270 square kilometers of land. At the same time, Putin's soldiers were reported to have been capturing and killing civilians in the same region.
The situation is complicated. We work day and night. We're short on munitions, and we're trying to save as much as we can.
Now, military experts say that by carrying out this offensive, Moscow may be working to draw Ukrainian troops out of other hotspots, like near Donetsk. The situation is made even more difficult after a major delay in the U.S. Congress halted military shipments to Ukraine, despite the passing of a bill worth over $60 billion. The months-long standstill has left its mark. The Russians have been working to use this to their own advantage, but there's a problem. Recent months have shown that Putin's army is lacking manpower. A major push for conscription could be seen all over the country and abroad. The situation in Ukraine is no different. On Saturday, a new law to mobilize troops came into force, lowering the minimum age for conscription and replacing conscription with military training for those aged under 25.
We need to staff the reserves. There are a serious number of brigades, existing brigades, which a large number of them are empty. We need to do this so that the guys have a normal rotation.
The new law doesn't only affect Ukrainians at home. Those living abroad will be denied consular services, including passport renewals, without military registration. Meanwhile, their main focus remains protecting frontline cities and taking back land that's rightfully theirs.
Right, now in just a second we'll be talking about Poland's response to the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and we'll go into that in detail. But let's set some context first, okay? One of the reasons that Russia has given for the invasion of Ukraine was that it has been threatened by NATO's expansion and European Union expansion, which they consider provocative. Agnieszka, what would you say to that
I'm not sure
justification?
I'm not sure they said the European Union expansion is provocative. They were focused solely on NATO. Of course, it was kind of pretext, but on the other hand, we have to understand that it was. How can I put it? I think it's partly our fault. It's a NATO fault that NATO gave Ukrainian people false hope and false feeling of being supported by the West, which it isn't, to say at least. The manpower, which is the biggest problem on the front right now, is not going to be helped in any way by the West. So they are somehow alone in this, even if the weapon is going there from the West, not as much as I would like, but they have. It is. I think we, as the West, we should have very long look into ourselves, because we did this. We just left them to dry.
Right. I mean, I fully understand. I mean, Ukraine has been asking for much more munitions and armaments and other support since the war started, and the West has been slow. It's been dragging its feet in providing that. But does this reflect an underlying systemic problem with the West? Or is it something that, again, comes down to the fact that, there are so many countries involved in the decision and many of them are forced to act alone? I mean, what's going on?
Well, it's difficult for prosperous and wealthy countries to think in terms of welfare economy. Even if it's could be a very small extent in comparison with Russian thinking about it, I cannot agree that Ukraine is alone. Most of civilized and democratic countries are supporting Ukraine in one way or another. Of course, it's not sufficient enough, and many mistakes were made. We've seen Secretary Blinken recently making very nice PR stunt, playing electric guitar in a pub in Kiev, while at the same time Russians are preparing to lay siege on Kharkov, and they just and the Ukrainians also have a problem with stopping this incursion, because they are not allowed to use Western delivered weapon outside of internationally recognized Ukrainian borders.
Well, that's changing, though, hasn't it? I mean,
Britain has nothing against it, but Blinken said something that it's up to Kiev to decide, but then Pentagon was strongly denying that they cannot agree with it.
Well, clearly a political move from Blinken, otherwise,
of course,
provocation.
If you play guitar, you can also play
all kinds of music.
Yeah,
all kinds of music. So Jakub, tell me, many European countries do not appreciate the level of the threat to the rest of Europe that is posed by Russia's invasion of Ukraine. How would you characterize that level of threat?
When we were talking about Ukraine and the NATO, yes, that we gave them too much hope, I would see that in this level of Russian elite paranoia, I'm not talking only Putin, we should, Ukraine should join NATO
in 2008.
2008, and that would be all, because at that time Russia were too weak to start an invasion, and they would simply get used to it, that we have NATO, because it changed nothing. Nobody from NATO would attack Russia, never, because for what? They, of course, are they are talking and talking all the time, and they make them think that way, simply, that NATO is a threat and we have to respond, and then we have to...
Yes, but how much of a threat is Russia to the rest of Europe?
You know, as we see, Russia brings the great destabilization in the whole Europe. It can poison people in Great Britain. It can kill, Russian agent killed one of the Chechen leader in the Tiergarten Park in Berlin. They blow up the ammunition storage in Czech. They have no limits in this kind of violent attacks throughout the Europe. So I think that they went off the scale. They are talking openly about attacking anybody in Europe. To blow strikes on nuclear strikes on
the UK, for example.
On UK, on France, on Berlin.
Yeah.
So I think these people, the propaganda already works on that level, that whole of the nation is prepared to do anything. If Putin starts war with the Baltics, they say, of course, because they are Russophobic, they will always find the reason to attack, justification to attack anybody.
Right.
So I would say for Poland and Baltics is almost direct threat, and for other countries, Russians. Don't see the limits.
Don't see a limit. Yeah. Well, unfortunately, Agnieszka, I think you probably agree that many European and America as well don't see that the extension of that threat.
Actually, I'm one of them. I don't see this extension of this threat. I don't think Russia is really so suicidal to attack any NATO country, especially seeing how badly it's going for them in Ukraine. So I think this is. For both sides, this is a way to steer emotion and to put people on the offense and be emotionally involved in this hybrid war.
Right.
And I think, and what Mr. had said, that equating being for peace with being for Russia. And this is how it works in Poland, for everybody, and mainly in European or Western elites. If somebody is saying it's time to stop this war, he's pro-Russian, and we are not able to discuss even a way of going out of this war, even if most Europeans do not believe that Ukraine can win this war.
Right.
Only 17% in Poland. The biggest percentage is in Poland. It's 17.
Right. Well, that depends on how you define winning.
Well, it's going really back to the borders from before the war.
Okay,
maybe
so before the war, so the original borders.
Realistic.
Russia has simply said that they're not interested in even discussing that. They want it frozen, like they have a frozen conflict in Georgia and other countries. So finding some kind of compromise, I suggest, between Ukraine and Russia would be difficult. Now, talking about the threat to the rest of Europe, Jakub, Poland has just invested, or is investing, 2.3 billion euros, or 10 billion zloty, on what is called the Eastern Shield, which is a physical defence on the eastern border of Poland. Has President Tusk, we see the article there from our portal, has Prime Minister Tusk actually overestimated the risk of this threat? I mean, is this 2.3 billion euros worth spending?
Well, I think we are too much focused on money. Money is not a problem from our Western or European or NATO perspective. We are facing a threat of the country which has a GDP something between Italy and Spain. Can you imagine Italy or Spain waging a war against their neighbors and threatening to destroy half of the developed world?
You're talking about Russia now.
Yeah, I'm talking about Russia. Russians are doing that. So the problem is not money. We can spend 3 billion euro, we can spend 100 billion euro, not we as a Poland, but collectively as an alliance. The problem is a lack of will. And if we are talking about the threat from Russia, the problem is that we are setting red lines on everything, and Russians, the sky is the limit. You know, they can say that they bomb us with nuclear weapons, even if we all know they won't do it, because their Chinese patrons would never allow them to do that. So Russia is always much weaker than it looks like, and it's also much stronger than it looks like. This is the old saying.
Well, it's a hybrid approach that they have taken with the rest of the world.
But if you have mentioned that Poles are or Central Europeans are the only nations and societies which majority of people think that Ukraine can win that war. This is just a proof of very realistic and very well-based assessment of what are the real capabilities of Russian state. You know, we face them. We face them from centuries, from the perspective of French people, of Germans, of Americans. All they know is just this huge empire, and we should be afraid of it.
Right.
This is just a. You know, have you ever been to Russia? Of course, we've been. All of us, we've been to Russia, and we've seen that. You know, this is not something which has a big, strong fundamentals and strong basis for steady economic development. This is the country rotten with corruption, and country which is not appreciating and not respecting its own people. You know, Putin throw 500,000 of people to the meat grinder, and his biggest achievements are moving the front line for a few kilometers east or south or something.
Well, that's a military issue, and we can talk about it
that's
elsewhere.
not true. There is no country in Europe where the majority of people think that Ukraine can win this war. I think in Poland there are 17% of people who think Ukraine can win this war.
What do you propose?
I mean Ukraine can win this war, so we are not so optimistic as you can think.
Okay, I was not following the polls in that regard.
And the rest of Europe is even less. So what do I propose? I, of course, propose. I'm always for the peace negotiation. And if I can say one thing, there is Kyiv International Institute of Sociology, and they have this rather new poll, when said that there are much more people in Ukraine who are ready to negotiate. They are not ready to give any land, of course, but they think it's time to start as well, not only on the battlefield, but also it's time for
diplomatic moves. Well, okay, we shall see what happens. But Jakub, you were saying that basically, there is no solution apart from a military one. Is that what you're saying? And
I guess so at this state, yes, because the Russia thinks that they already set its country on the military tracks, and this is like war logic already there.
Right. So does that mean that Poland's investment in the Eastern Shield, as I described a minute ago, is something that needs to continue and does have value, and it does protect the rest of Europe?
I guess so. We saw the element of hybrid war with the migrant crisis, for example, which is definitely made to destabilize Poland and other Western countries, and also we have to face it. However, unfortunately, diplomacy couldn't work well, and building of the physical barrier. It's not only the...
But don't you have an impression that this barrier is already set and it's pretty much stable, and we keep situation under control? So maybe I wouldn't hesitate to think about instead of giving some concrete barriers on a relatively short and well protected border, maybe this money could be spent to to finish all the armament shipments and contracts which were signed recently, and now we quite often, way too often, listening to we should to reconsider those contracts if they are enough, if they are sufficient, if we need those weapons. You know, we actually
so maybe the money should be spent elsewhere.
I also don't believe that Russians would dare to attack NATO.
Let's hope so.
Any country, but you know, they will. It will be more certain if we'll be armed to teeth.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, unfortunately, we're going to have to end the conversation here. It's gone so quickly. There's so much more that I wish we had had time to speak about. So I'd like to thank all of you, Agnieszka Wolk-Waniewska.
Perfect.
I'm getting better. Jakub Mielnik, columnist at
Thank you for having me here.
And Jakub Biedna from Belsat TV. Thank you all very much. And thank you for joining us today, and we hope we gave you plenty of food for thought. Have a good day.